And there's a play called Crippled, which has been getting rave reviews. It's been running at the LSPU Hall for the last few days, and there are performances again this afternoon and this evening. It's the tale of a man going through a challenging life experience. It's also opening the eyes of its audience members. Paul Power not only wrote Crippled, he's also part of the cast. Pat Dempsey is also a cast member of Crippled, and Paul Power and Pat Dempsey dropped into our Weekend AM studio to tell us more. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
And hello, Pat.
How are you doing?
Well, first of all, just tell our listeners a little bit about what the play is about.
Well, Crippled is about, I play a character named Tony, and he finds himself down on the St. John's Harbour front in the middle of the night, sort of contemplating life. He's just had a negative encounter down on, the George Street party area, and he's also dealing with grief because his partner has passed away a few years ago. And he's also very self-conscious about his looks because the character uses the aid of crutches and leg braces, as I do, Paul Power, the actor. Mm-hmm. So it's all that going through his head about how tough life is, and does he really want to engage in life anymore? And a mysterious stranger by the name of Evan, played by my acting partner Pat Dempsey here, encounters Tony and sort of challenges him to ask, what is he doing down here? And from that, a whole friendship and a night of dialogue evolves.
All right, and that's where you come into it, Pat.
That's where I come in, yeah.
Now, you're a few shows into the run. How's it been going?
It's been going great.
Really well received. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We found the opening night was just amazing. I mean, as they often are, but I feel like there was reactions I've never had on opening nights before.
In what way?
In a way, the way that it touched the audience. What's so great I find about this play is the fact that even though it's specifically about many things that directly relate to Paul's life, living with a disability and things like that, the themes become very universal, mm-hmm. especially dealing with the loss of his partner. Love is a really important theme that comes through this, and dealing with loss. And you can see that the audience really reacted to that, and it touched them in a really deep way. It was amazing to have people come up and not even say anything, just sort of hold your hand and tear a little bit, or just need to like a lot of people just touching Paul's shoulder or patting it and just walking away misty-eyed and speechless, really, with a loss of words to say. Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of plays with, emotional themes on the go, and, it sounds very emotionally moving, but it sounds like people are just having a really unusual reaction to it. What do you think that is, Paul?
Well, yeah, it has been strong reactions, and we're doing, towards the end of the play, you can hear crying and everything in the theater. As Paul the playwright, that's great because you want reactions to your writing. But I think it is because I set out to write Crippled. The disability component is just staying true to my own physicality and experience. But the grief part, I've learned over the past several years, there's a shared connection over loss, whether someone has passed away or a relationship has ended or a friendship has ended. We all have been through that at some level in our lives. And I've had so many people say to me, I've captured that really well, what grief does to you or how that changes your perspective on life. And it's such a personal experience, grief, but it's also a shared universal experience because you can all relate in some way of how, you lose someone and you always have that challenge of, can I go on? Or do I have the drive to go on? And I think that's what's really hitting home with people.
But in a way, I mean, we can explain this to our listeners a bit right now because obviously we're on radio and we can't see you.
Right.
But, you are a person with a visible, different look for people, a disability. But it's not really, it doesn't sound like it's really about a disability.
No, it's Yeah, it would be very easy just to do a play, and here you are. You look different, so it runs deeper than that. It's more about disability within, I guess. Especially this day and age with all the awareness and everything. I think we're more aware that lots of people walk around with some kind of disability that you can't necessarily see, and I think that hits home too with the audiences. The language that's used in the play and the monologues, and that can be relatable regardless if you are using crutches or leg braces or not, or if you can see it or not.
Okay, can you just explain to your listeners a bit, if they first see you for the first time, like what might strike them about your appearance as opposed to a person next to you, say?
Right. Well,
he's incredibly handsome.
Yeah,
that, of course. Yes.
I write that in all my plays, that everyone has to say I'm
yes.
attractive. Yeah, so I was born with a disability. My legs didn't develop quite right, so they were shorter than the rest of my upper bodies, and I use leg braces for extra support. So what you notice is I'm about 4'7", 4'8", and along for stability, I use crutches with both arms. So they'll see someone walking with the aid of crutches, as well as a bit short in stature, and I've been in lots of plays, and the great thing I've always heard is, it's a bit unexpected when an actor walks out, and it doesn't meet that physical ideal we mostly see on stage or on screen. And the best feedback I've gotten is, once you're 15 minutes into the play, it's forgotten. You see beyond it, and that's one of the best compliments, because it means you're being true to the story and the character.
I understand from your bio you've been really actively involved with the movement for diversity in the theater scene. I've heard you say that this is a really interesting time to be incorporating that in the theater. Like, what's going on right now in theater that's such an opportunity for people who maybe aren't conventionally appearing as actors or actresses?
Well, I had the opportunity to go to a lot of national conferences and meet a lot of other disabled artists, either working on stage or behind the scenes. There seems to be a movement of artists with various forms of disabilities being invited to do their work and getting exposure for that, which I don't think you'd see like 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
And there's also a movement with casting and what they call sort of blind casting, and a movement for our stages to reflect our world. The Canada Council is big on that. The National Arts Centre is big on that. There's a big movement of people wanting to go out and see a play or a movie that reflects their lives, that reflects their physical identity, which is, in our society, diverse. So there's a lot of movement to make our stages as diverse as our real world. And I think it's happening. I mean, not totally, but it's definitely on everybody's radar a lot more than it was like 10 years ago.
Well, I wonder what you guys think of this movement in pop culture. Remember a couple of years ago, there was the Oscars So White movement, where they're talking about all kinds of diversity issues there. And even with the Me Too movement and women trying to make a better stand for themselves in that sort of entertainment industry, is that having any sort of spillover effect into the fields where you guys work?
I think it really reflects just a greater mindset, is that whatever the previously marginalized community is, we're all looking forward and wanting to incorporate those communities, whether that be the disabled community, different racial minorities that aren't getting represented, or even having suitable and meaty roles for women. It's all the same mindset. It's moving forward, and these are all things we want to see. And I think that speaks to what Paul was saying earlier about us wanting to see real life on stage, on the screen, that sort of thing, right?
And you also want to get more diverse people into the audience, don't you?
That as well, yeah.
Tell me what you're doing about that.
Well, it's interesting because Paul has been really big on accessibility in the theater for performers. He's been writing himself some good roles and stuff like that, but also for the audience, right? And so a lot of the time people think of accessibility meaning a wheelchair ramp or an elevator or a lift. And so performing at the LSPU hall, we've even had the counter question, well, the hall is accessible. It has a ramp, it has a lift, and people in wheelchairs and mobility issues can get up and see a show. Paul has really fought to bring that one step further, and we have nights where we're providing audio description. So if people have vision issues, if they're blind or have partial vision, we have someone who actually describes through headsets the play, so you get more of an audio description of the play.
Right.
We have ASL interpreters doing sign language for certain performances.
Okay.
And assisted hearing devices as well that were donated from the Canadian Association for the Hard of Hearing. So that's great. So if you have trouble hearing but aren't completely deaf, you also have a way of enjoying the show as well.
Sound is amplified for them. It's kind of some of these things are kind of new for Newfoundland theater, and I keep saying, especially the audio description, we don't have a resource for that here in the province for theater. I think it's one of the first times it's ever been done, which we're really proud of, and it's a whole market we want to reach, right? Theater is about community.
I know this is only one part of your master plan to make the world just more accessible for everybody. Like, what's next after Crippled for you, Paul?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I got the opportunity. The National Arts Centre did a multi-year project called The Cycle, which they brought artists with various degrees of disabilities together to discuss theater and disability. I learned so much through that because I met so many artists with different disabilities. I always say I'm only an expert on my own disability, and that's really where I learned about, what the experience of being deaf or blind, which is what drove wanting to make this show accessible. Mm-hmm. But it also captivated me that there were so many great artists out there with different disabilities, and I also learned that I was sort of a rarity in. I started acting and being involved in theater back when I was at Memorial University, and I just went to auditions because I wanted to audition or I wanted to have a role in a play, and it didn't seem like a big deal to me. And then talking to these other artists that I just described, most of them didn't feel welcome to go out for audition or just assumed I'm not going to get a role because I don't fit that perfect stereotype, right? I thought that was a shame for my company, Power Productions, is putting persons with disabilities who have some aspirations to make arts as their career a foundation to build on that. So Power Productions is going to be engaged in workshops and cabarets and that to link persons with disabilities with some training and experience of putting off a production. So they might have at least a little bit of a more even advantage when it comes to auditioning. If they're competing with someone who's been in 50 plays, at least they can say I've had some training and I've been in this production, and hopefully it will open doors to more, and linking those persons with disabilities with the artistic decision makers who cast and all that.
Well, keep us both posted, and best of luck with the rest of the run of Crippled.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.